Welcome back, everybody, for session 2 of the Playtime Session Speaker Series brought to you by us, Jima Esports. We are Jima Esports. My name is Kevin Sultani from Los Angeles, coming live. My partner in crime, Mr. Jassim from Dubai. How's it going?
All good. Ready for session 2.
Ready to take over session 2? Yeah, it's your turn to take over. In the first session, just to recap, I was live with Mr. Danny from Geek Leads, Mr. Danny Martin from Geek Leads, the founder, CEO of Geek Leads, Esports and Education equals opportunity. Esports plus education equals opportunity. I love that. It was a fantastic podcast. Yeah, what did you think about it?
I loved it, honestly. Danny, what an enlightening and fantastic guy, full of energy. Obviously, what they're doing is, way beyond the years. I think, bringing so much value to the kids these days and transcending, knowledge to esports and gaming is so important. And I think, it's beyond what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah, I like what you said. That they really have done a good job to get that boost of COVID, which everyone's been at home and go forth. And what they're doing to set up their, everything from what they have coming on in their pipeline and what they had going on pre-COVID to add on to in the virtual world now is, I think it segues quite nicely for them. And I think they're doing great things. And what we've heard about internationally is going to be really exciting too. So really cool stuff. We're going to pivot now. We're going to go to stay on education because that's a topic for today, but we're going to pivot to university education, higher level education, and speaking with a professor director of one of the largest programs in the United States for a sports management program. I believe we're ranked 25th, 20th. And I say we because I am so proud to have our alumni, University of San Francisco, the Dons, where you and I met in international finance class in 2009. And we went on degrees at that fine university. And
I think I beat you in the finance class, right?
Yeah, you definitely did. I was not the best student. I was too busy creating business. Some of us are too busy outside of class.
I see.
But Dr. Dan today, Dr. Dan Rashner is the director. Daniel Rashner, I apologize. Dr. Daniel Rashner is the director and professor of the sports management program at the University of San Francisco in San Francisco campus here in Orange County, California as well. And what Dr. Daniel and team have done is expedite a fantastic program already into a magnificent program internationally. We are all over the world, and now the sports management program is dipping its toes into esports and gaming. And I say dipping its toes because it has announced and it will do great work in the education aspect, but esports aspect, we do have a team, and that team is being fastly supported by the city of San Francisco and the executives around. So let's get in Dr. Dan now and have you guys get at it. There we go. Dr. Dan, how you doing? Welcome to
our podcast. How you guys doing? I'm doing great.
We're awesome. We're awesome. Great to have you on.
Thank you so much for being with us. Gave a little preface. I never do the justice of the person, him or herself. Would love to hear from your mouth about yourself and your work to our audience. But before that, I will bow out and say goodbye for this session and let you guys to it. Thank you so much for your time. Every time we talk on email or talk, I learned so much from you, and I know our audience is going to benefit equally. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Kevin.
I'll see you guys soon. Have a great session.
Dr. Dan, fellow Don, welcome to Playtime.
Thanks for having me.
To have you on. No, it's a pleasure, honestly, and we're super excited to get you on and talk about all things esports, gaming, and sports management, which is something that I am keen and very interested in. Just before we get going, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, give us a little bit of a background, tell us a little bit more about the sports management program at USF and some of the things that we're doing there.
Yeah, excellent. So again, I'm Dan Rasher. I run the sport management program at the University of San Francisco. I've been teaching there for a little over 20 years. We're a master's program with 2 locations, San Francisco, Orange County. It's a 2-year evening program, so our students, while they come into the program, begin working in various aspects of sports, including in esports. And we graduate about 100 master's students a year, so we're the largest master's program in the U.S. And we're in the top 10 in the U.S. and number 12 internationally. Again, I'm not a huge fan of those ranking algorithms and things like that, but we really do have a good program with nearly 3,000 graduates, most of whom are working in some aspect of sports. So the network that our students can tap into, and we're going to add you guys to our network, even though you guys are undergrads at USF, it really is what benefits our students a lot, their ability to tap into the sports industry.
Absolutely. No doubt we're a fantastic school. So those numbers, are very, I think we can do better as well. Dr. Dan, look, I'd love to jump into, because obviously it's so interesting to look at the similarities between sports management, the traditional sports, and esports and gaming, and we'll kind of dive into the gaming side as well. Talk us into a little bit of what USF is doing to tackle the esports side of things at the moment. Obviously, there's a big buzz going on. I'm sure, especially in sports management, some of the students were potentially interested in jumping into that side of things. What are we doing at the moment? And other than, I know we do have a student-run team, but what are we doing to kind of integrate esports into our educational program and get things going on that front?
So, and that's a great question. We at the University of San Francisco in our sport management program, we have these elective sequences where each cohort of 35 students creates or comes up with their own ideas for what they want the electives to be. They do that, 4 or 5 months ahead of time. I go out and find people like yourself and Kevin to create these elective courses. And so we're going to be doing that in the spring for an esports course that Kevin said that he's going to put together, maybe with you, whomever else. And we're super excited. Yeah, we're going to have an esports management course. We're really excited. I mean, we've had students kind of each year. We get a few more students that are interested in esports. I think one of the challenges is that a lot of students don't think of it as being a place where they can go get a job, right? They realize coming into the program they can go work for the Golden State Warriors or the San Francisco Giants or IMG, some sort of agency, or ESPN. They don't realize that they could go work in an esports space. And so I think part of our job, and something that we have to do a better job at, is letting them know that this is an area that they can get a job in, that they can grow their career in, that they can use the skills in our sport management program to be able to succeed in. And so that's one reason why we're excited to offer this esports elective. And if that becomes popular, then we can maybe bump that into 2 courses and maybe even make a sequence of esports courses. So a student can kind of round out their education at USF. And then you had mentioned, I just want to throw in, one of our alums, Robert Yoshida, he's an alum from our program. He started the esports team at USF, and he's trying to, there's discussions about carving out a space for him, his team, so they can train and they can play games. And so there's, that discussion was ongoing and actually was moving forward fairly nicely until COVID-19 hit. And then really the university is just consumed with how are we going to teach in the fall, in person, online, hybrid, which students are going to show up and not. So all that stuff on esports has really been put on hold a little bit for the last few months.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll definitely see some gamification tactics into education, which we'll touch on a little bit later. As far as the elective goes, what are you looking at doing as far as management? Because obviously esports is in and of itself very similar to, sports management. So from your side, I'd love to kind of hear what you think of the similarities are between the two. And how you can already integrate some of those, lessons from traditional sports to esports.
Right. No, and that's one reason why we think it makes sense. So in our sport management program, the students learn the foundational skills of management. So we cover things like economics, finance, accounting, budgeting, marketing, strategic management, business development, sales. What am I missing here? Sports law. And so they'll take those sort of foundational courses, social media, communication, and we know that all of those, as you said, relate to the esports industry. And so we think our students can come in and help put events on through event management skills. They can sell sponsorships, right? Create, partnerships between endemic and non-endemic sponsors and help activate those sponsorships, right? That's a big part of what we teach in the sports management program, is the importance of sponsorship in the space of sports and in the future in the space of esports, and how that's really a big driver of the revenue streams, and how brands can kind of attach themselves, right, to the fan base, wrap themselves around the athletes and the sporting events and the esport events, and be able to succeed as brands. And so we think it fits really nicely with what we already teach. We just need to then take those foundational skills that they learn during the first year and a half of the program, and then apply them to a particular industry. So the other electives are often around intercollegiate sports, or running a pro sports team, or entrepreneurship, or things like that. And so now we're hoping, again, with your work and with Kevin's help, to put together that esports program.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask you, within the sports management courses that you're taking on right now, has there been anything that you've seen that are maybe, or differences, not just similarities, because obviously there are a lot, like just like we mentioned, within management and I think marketing, community management, sponsorships, all of that is obviously in and of itself very similar. We, Kevin and I have run an esports team, and looking at it from, looking at the traditional teams like Manchester United, the Lakers, are, very similar as far as how those are run and how you create revenue and commercial strategy. What are some of the differences that you think one should look at when it comes to sports management and esports?
Yeah, that's a great.
Is there anything that in your mind sticks out immediately?
So I think one of the interesting aspects is the ability for esports and esports events to draw in viewership worldwide. I mean, with Twitch and YouTube gaming and other platforms that people will watch these events on. You don't really have that. Like a Lakers game is typically broadcast locally, maybe nationally, and also maybe internationally, right? But a big part of what they're doing also is what's going on in the stadium, right? Generating ticket revenue, concessions, and merchandise, and all those sort of sales. And so I think esports can do that with their esports events. But imagine the esports events where you don't really have many people in person. It's mostly an event that's
virtual.
Yeah, and I think that is really ahead of the game in terms of what we see with professional sports. Now we're starting to see, unfortunately, with COVID-19, right? We're seeing, I was watching Major League Soccer over the weekend. There's nobody in the stands. I'm just watching it on television or on my computer when I was working. And so I think that's one of the big differences, is that esports draws fans in from all over the world for a particular event. And I think that the ability to capture the value of all of that, I think is really important for esports. They're putting on these events that they're not always making a lot of money off of the event per se, in terms of registrations and tickets and things like that. And I said, I think the sports industry can maybe help grow that space. And then also the sponsorship space, as I mentioned before, super developed in professional and intercollegiate sports. And I think in esports, it's going to be something that has to be developed in order to sustain these esports teams, right? I mean, the gaming companies themselves are making money, right? But is everybody else making money or not? And where's that happening? So I think that the formal sports industry training, I think, is going to help with a lot of that.
No, I think you're right. I want to touch on one thing. Obviously, teams and the way that organizations are structured. I think, in the esports side of things, that structure is still kind of building. It's still in the building blocks. It's not really, perfectioned yet. Whereas, the traditional sports side, everything's kind of built already. It's been, you've been working with similar strategies for over hundreds of years. So
Yeah.
at this time, you have esports kind of just still growing and figuring out what's the best way to commercialize their team, their players, and their content, essentially. Another thing that I wanted to point out, which is very interesting, is that obviously one thing that esports is doing right is taking their content virtual, and not just creating revenue from physical events, but most of it comes from virtual, right? So, in my opinion, that's something that traditional sports should be learning from the esports side of things, correct? Whereas you have those, a lot of traditional teams and leagues even are looking to take their traditional physical experience onto a virtual platform where they're able to reach more and more people. What do you think about that? And what other things do you think that traditional teams, players, sports can learn from the virtual side of esports and gaming?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I was thinking about this the other day, especially with COVID-19, and that this is an opportunity for these traditional sports leagues to reach their audience or a new audience in different ways. So we traditionally, we watch a sporting event on television, right? It goes a certain amount of time and then we're done with it, right? But a lot of people, including my teenagers, consume sports in a different way. I mean, my youngest kid, he doesn't watch a full sporting event. I mean, maybe he's watched one. He watches snippets of things, he watches pieces, he sees things on YouTube, and he's very interested. But he doesn't need to see a whole game. And so I think, getting a different perspective. Imagine watching an NBA game where you're really getting that virtual reality seat that's on the floor, right? Or you're getting some sort of sitting on the bench with the players in a sense, listening to what they're talking about with the coach, what's the strategy, right? I think these different ways of consuming these traditional sporting events, I think they're going to make them so much more valuable. And I haven't seen, at least myself, anyone really succeed at that yet in terms of traditional sports. Now in esports, right, you can watch from a different gamer's perspective, and so there's much more, I think, an advancement in esports that the traditional sports leagues can get. And then it's a whole new revenue stream. I mean, imagine the revenue streams from selling these different perspectives to customers.
Absolutely. Crazy. And look, and another thing, and this is very interesting for management, right? For management, when you're talking to students, I think sports management very interesting because you do focus on the organizational aspect and the individual talent, or I guess you can get into the health side as well, which is same thing in esports. One of the questions I had was, gamers today are kind of becoming very fast, are becoming similar to influencers, right? Where they're able to come to create revenue just via their streaming ability or by putting consistent content out there. Whereas the traditional athlete is more, more stuck to their team and the structure around what the team does on a competitive level. Is that something that you would look to teach students? How to create a commercial strategy for themselves, more rather than just an organization, or leaning on the organization, which is what I think a lot of athletes do, right? You get you get drafted into a team and you kind of lean on the team to help you create your commercial strategy. Obviously you have an agent come in and help you with the sponsorship side of things, but these guys don't stream. They don't put themselves on a virtual platform and create all these different kinds of revenues. So isn't that an interesting aspect where I think education also comes in play when you're looking at creating revenue and commercial strategy virtually for an individual?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, that these esports gamers are constantly practicing and training, and they have a stream that's going, and they have people watching them on that, and they're generating revenues off of that, right? A basketball player, people aren't watching them practice yet, but Steph Curry, for instance, will have snippets of his training regimen, right? And he's put those out to the public. Now, I don't know if he's directly generating revenue off of that, but he certainly could, and I think you will see more of that. And so in our program, it's really interesting. We have a couple of different courses that focus on personal branding and building your own brand, and some of that talks about influencers and how to become an influencer and what that means and what's the point. And so obviously a professional athlete in a traditional sport can become an influencer, right? And they can sign endorsement deals and they can do promotions, using digital media. But it's not a natural part of what they do. As you said, they play the sport, they rely on the team often. We've got a couple of courses that are on athlete branding where and they're both taught by people who do this for professional athletes. So they're not the agent for the athlete, they're not the business manager, they're their branding manager, and they help them push their brand out into the public. And so that's a growing area within sports management. But I think it's a natural fit for an esports athlete to be doing that because they're already online playing, streaming, getting people to watch. I mean, it's such a great vehicle for them that's just naturally part of the structure of what they do that I think more traditional, stick and ball athletes are having to learn how to do. And so from a training perspective, you've seen, I've seen it with my kids. They've been going to some Zoom trainings when they're not allowed to be in person that are put on by professional athletes or college athletes. And so I do think that there's a market for having an athlete's training regimen become something that people can watch or take part in. And I just haven't seen it done really well yet,
I think it's very soon to come. One of the things that we're looking at focusing on is helping those traditional, whether you're an athlete or just an organization, get to a virtual space where you're able to connect with audiences so far away and even just create, I'd say, longevity in your content, right? Traditional athletes, sports teams are on television once or twice a week, you could say. Whereas the gamer, the streamer is on as much as he wants. He's on every day consistently and then competes once a week. But, is always there, engaging and increasing their brand value. So I think that's a huge lesson for the traditional side of things. And I think they're going to, the traditional sports organizations are going to learn how to flip the switch and jump.
I've actually I published research on that topic showing the endorsement value of athletes based on their how often they're on television. So I studied professional tennis players, professional golfers, boxers, baseball players, football players, the NBA, and it's real. If you think about think about a boxer. So part of what motivated me to do this was I was working on a lawsuit for Floyd Mayweather Jr. He and Manny Pacquiao were suing each other, and I was brought in to figure out, was there a financial harm to one of them because of the statements, because of a defamation statement made by the other one. And in any event, in going through that process, I realized that boxers are only on television a couple hours a year. Think about it. Most of these guys do 1 or 2 matches a year. It's for a few hours. So they are not marketable in that sense. They're not they're not out in the public eye. A pro tennis player, if they're top 10 and they're going to make the final, or the final 4, whatever, the semifinals, they're going to be on TV every week, right? And the camera's going to be on them half the match and half the match on the other player. Take a baseball player, right? They're going to get a few at-bats a game. Maybe they're going to be in the outfield. The camera's not going to be on them that much. And so if you look at the payments to the stars of endorsements, it follows right along the line of their exposure on television. And so just what you said, a streamer might be on 3 or 4 hours a day, every day, and then be in tournaments, right? There's no other sport where that happens. And so these athletes in these traditional sports have to find a way to get themselves, in front of the public. And I think it's going to be a little bit like we saw with NASCAR in the 1980s and 90s, where the brands realized how valuable putting their name on one of these cars was because of how much time it spent in front of the camera. And the price of those sponsorships shot through the roof over the next 2 decades after that. I think esports is about to hit a point where everyone's going to realize this, and the value of these brands are going to go up, and these esports gamers and the teams are going to make a lot more money from sponsorships. Everyone's just trying to figure it out,
No, absolutely, absolutely. And one more thing is, it really helps with, I would say, the after or the longevity of an athlete's career, right? Let's say you're a really good athlete. Maybe you have a good personality. Some of these guys get injured very early on and then are just, they crumble. They cannot find anything else to do. We can talk about all of the emotional, physical distress that they go through. Whereas in esports, or in gaming in general, I shouldn't just say esports because it's not just the competitive side, but if you have a good enough personality and are able to game and create engagements just because you're someone that people like to watch, then that goes way beyond your professional career. And you've seen that happen with so many streamers out there that are not essentially just gamers and play professionally, but are just part-time, love to play and have a good charisma or personality that they're able to monetize. And that's something that I think a lot of students, the youth can learn, is how to monetize not just your competitive play, but your personality if you're good at streaming. And then that comes into management in general, not just sports management and such.
Right. No, I mean, I agree with you. It's interesting to think about all the esports teams that are popping up at universities. And I know that Kevin and Danny were talking about UC Irvine and Robert Morris College, right, and various schools that were early adopters of launching esports teams. Well, imagine if intercollegiate esports grows in popularity, those esports athletes will be able to do the same thing, stream and make money off of that. And so one of the questions in college sports, I've done a lot of work in college sports, is can the athletes really be paid? Can they make money off of their brand, their name, image, and likeness? Can they do endorsements or not, right? So we're seeing in traditional intercollegiate sports that that's starting to happen. Within the next couple of years, the college athletes are going to be allowed to make money off of their personality. So just like you said, if they have a great personality, they can become an influencer. While the esports athletes, again, have that natural platform where if they become popular on the college campuses, they'll be able to monetize that.
Absolutely. I want to segue just a little bit into the gaming space because, obviously USF, San Francisco, we're in one of the top cities in the world for technology and game companies. I mean, Twitch is based in San Francisco. You have Discord. You have so many different gaming, companies, conglomerates based in the city. And it's interesting to see that, obviously not just esports, but a lot of things in the education space is becoming, I would say, gamified, right? Danny and Kevin in the previous session were talking about environments like Fortnite and Minecraft and how those attribute to architecture, engineering, software development, and you can go on. What do you what are we doing? Is there something that USF is doing to integrate gaming within our traditional courses or the traditional education of, I'd say, architecture, software development, whatever it is? And do you think that's gonna, is that something that you see growing?
So I don't think USF is doing a lot in that space other than individual courses. Like in my course, I have a gamification. I have a couple of things that I do. One of them is we play a stock market contest. So the students have to understand how to value a business and what makes a company worth more than another? What makes a company financially healthy? And then they do that in the context of running a stock market contest that we track the whole course. And they really compete, and they really, like, when I'll see someone take,
of course,
they're like, oh, I love that stock market contest. I finished third. I was so bummed. I thought I was going to finish first. They really remember that, which of course is the point of gamification in education, right? It's to engage the students. It really becomes solidified in their memory if they were competitive about it, right? I also do a thing where it's called it's a sports business simulation, where they pretend to run a sports team, and then they have to build a stadium, and they have to figure out how to finance it, and they compete with each other based on the net income and the franchise value that this produces. So they're always trying to figure out how to, in some sense, reverse engineer the game and do best in it, right? And so again, that's another one where they tell me, 5 and 10 years later, hey, I love that sports business simulation where we built the stadium and all that sort of stuff. And so I think individual faculty are doing that, but I don't think, and again, I don't know for sure, but I don't think the university has quite understood the importance of integrating gamification or using gaming and or esports as a tool to teach something. So you mentioned, right, what a perfect tool to teach coding, programming, marketing. And so, we'll be doing that in our program in terms of teaching the business of sports through esports, right? And so you guys will be doing that in the spring. But I don't think the university has kind of wrapped itself around that concept yet. And so I think we need to do that. And so I'd love to talk with you guys about that in terms of what are the areas within the university that we should be using gaming as a tool to teach whatever that topic is,
I think there is so much, just like you said, that's, that example of that stock market exercise, it is fun. And it does allow you to compete with your peers, with your classmates to, win. You want to win. If me and Kevin were in the same class, I tell you, we would, sleepless nights just to come out on top, regardless of what the class or the objective was. So I think there's a lot to come of that. And I think there's so many different classes, topics that can be created or taken towards gamification, but it's also, you need the developers to come up with fun and interesting, platforms for that as well. So it's not just the universities. It's, I think, both sides of development side of things and the educators as well. To segue that into another space that I'd love to touch on is VR. What do you think about VR in the educational space? I've been working with a close company that is called Touch Surgery, and they are basically educating future doctors on, I'd say basic surgeries where you wear a VR headset, you kind of dive into the surgery early on, and that's what, gets your early training. What do you think about VR and how that's kind of, I think, now growing in the gaming space? Do you think that's going to take over a few of the educational, courses or the limelight, essentially?
I think it has to for certain types of learning. Like, we have a nursing program. In fact, our Orange County Sport Management program, we share a campus with a master's in nursing program, right? And so they have a couple of rooms where they've literally got bed, hospital beds and all this equipment, right? I go in there and I'm like, oh my God, look at all this equipment, right? And they have to come in and they work on that equipment. Well, guess what? With COVID-19, right, they can't go in there and work on that. So they've been coming up with ways, just what you said, with virtual reality sort of cameras and everything, and they can see the equipment really close and they can see it working. And again, this is all just sort of stopgap in the last few months. I think what will be really interesting is if someone could take a course in nursing or medicine or computer engineering or anything that there's a tangible product that you're learning about, and use it through virtual reality. I'm trying to think of, you're making me really think, which I really like. In, say, I teach economics and finance, right? I'm trying to think, how would I use virtual reality in that? And I would love to figure out how to do that. having students being able to learn from, not from sitting in the classroom, but from somewhere else, I think it's fascinating. And I haven't thought about how I could incorporate that, but I would.
We got to create.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way. It's, again, we have to create and come up with the plan or the underlying development of these things that make, I'd say, education more interesting, more fun, and more in touch with the younger generations that are coming up today. Right? These are all I'd say generations that grew up gaming, that grew up with interactive experiences. And so VR, in my opinion, is so big because you're able to feel and touch the classroom and not just be there, bored and of the traditional sense of things.
Right. I mean, you could build. I mean, you could. I mean, imagine a course where you have to build something and you build it in a VR space, right? And I think you had mentioned one of the games where you build architectural things. I'm forgetting the name of the game you mentioned, but Minecraft. Minecraft. Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. My youngest son builds these massive ships. He builds these cities in Minecraft, and he's so excited to think about them from an architectural perspective. He doesn't know architecture at all, but he understands. He's learning about how tall can this thing be? It doesn't make sense if it's too tall and everything. And so a better version of Minecraft where the physics come into play, the engineering comes into play, where things will fall down if they're not built properly, right? Imagine that. Imagine the ability to learn architecture through that, that tangible knowledge where you can build things and test them out immediately. Now I know that sort of software exists, but I don't think it's gamified, right? It's just
Agreed.
It's design software, right?
Agreed. I think your son, a future Don, I hope, has a bright future ahead.
Yeah, I hope so.
Look, I just want to bring it full circle and a few more things is, in your experience, what are some of the opportunities and career, the career opportunities that a typical sports management graduate is looking for? And if and when we are able to integrate esports into that program, would those opportunities be the same? So, I'd love for you to give just your thoughts on what someone that is looking to take their sports management education and implement that into an esports world. What would that look like?
Right. So I think that's a great question. That's a question. That's something that we are asked, and we have to do. I think, really, frankly, do a better job of explaining that so students understand that gaming and esports is a viable career. So one area that we've talked a bit about is sponsorship. It's such a big part of the sports industry. The endorsements, the sponsorships, the endemic brands and non-endemic brands that are getting into esports and gaming, that's a natural. And the sports management community has done a really good job in the traditional sports of kind of monetizing sponsorships and endorsements, right? So I think that's one. Another one is putting on events, right? I mean, event management, putting on events, both physical and virtual. And again, I think the virtual events, the esports folks have really maybe jumped ahead on that. And then there's player management and team management. There's the financial aspects of these major investments. I mean, imagine you're an Overwatch League team owner and you just invested millions of dollars to get into a league and to build your team, right? The sort of traditional budgeting, accounting, economics, and finance that we teach, I think comes into play there. Pricing of the product, what's the best way to maximize the value from all those consumers who are watching these events, right? What's the right pricing model and things like that. And so that's all, those are all things that we learn and we teach in our sport management program at a more general level. And I think that we can focus that in on for people who want to work in gaming or esports.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a huge segue there, and it's just very obvious how you can combine the two, and maybe segue a little bit into gaming, but the esports side of things, should be definitely a part of the, you know, the sports management side as well.
Right.
I'm going to leave it there. I'd love for you to, is there anything you want to end on? Is there anything we should be, or our audience should be looking forward to from USF, other than me and Kevin coming in and changing the game? Is there anything, in your opinion, that, you know, that people should watch out for in this space in our programs?
Yeah, I mean, our program, we have different courses every year based on the students' demand that we talked about. And so I think they should look for you guys teaching an esports course. And if that ends up becoming popular, that we can maybe break that into multiple courses and, eventually have a kind of a focus that the students can say, look, I have a sport management master's degree, but then I have a focus in esports. And so, the esports industry is growing, right? I mean, there's no question gaming is growing. And so I think as a program, we want to be on top of that as we see that grow. And so I think that's what they should look for is the kind of build out of a gaming and esports focus.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's definitely interesting to see what will happen in the next 10 years. And here comes Kevin right on cue. I was just about to say, Kevin, we've talked a lot about coming into USF and ending our careers as professors. So as long as I'm on one side of the campus and you're on the other, it looks like we can potentially make that happen in the esports virtual experiences side of things. What are your thoughts? You're on mute, buddy. Kevin, I think you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Am I on mute? We're good?
Yeah.
There you go.
I was saying to Dr. Dan a few years back, about 2017, we really got our work going in Dubai, but mostly on the blockchain side. And we really wanted to see, okay, how can we make a difference at USF? And like at our young age, we're 27 at that time, 28, and we don't have deep pockets to donate a building or put our names on anything just yet. But I'm not going to just stop there. I got to be able to do something. There's something I can do. So we reached out. I eventually got on the LA, alumni council. So I just wanted to be in the room. Now we're doing something, Jay and I, where we might be able to get that name proverbially on the building, but with esports, with an arena, with a classroom, with a program. I don't know. Not my name. We're not selfish to that. For the industry, for the esports industry. And that's really, really how funny full circle it came from blockchain, which probably should have been it, right? We should be called the GMA Blockchain Center at USF. We could have had it funded and everything. But no, here comes esports and here comes gaming, where our senior founding board member is Nolan Bushnell, founder, creator of Atari. He created it right down the street from USF, a little bit, in Santa Clara. And so, again, here we are at USF, and Jay and I are talking about getting that name on the building, and I think we're going to be able to do it with esports. And we're talking about an arena, courses, and great things. I want to see kids my age, when we get there, when I'm older, say they only came to USF for the esports program. And I truly, truly believe that's the case. And we heard it from yourself, and we heard it from a couple other people in the past. But do you think that's true? Do you think I'm delusionally optimistic, or is that something in 20 years that people are going to be, no, I went to USF because they took the time 20 years back to set up the courses, to set up an arena, a team, and the infrastructure. So now Chinese or Asian kids who are now prejudiced to coming here will say, no, they seem very close to our, verbiage and culture.
Yeah, I mean, we've got an engineering school that's launching. And one thing that's really fascinating about that is they're taking the basement of Harney, and you guys know Harney's a really big building, and they're converting it all into a creative lab space. And so students are going to be building things. And so I think gaming and the esports component can certainly be a part of that. The engineering school is really looking for ideas, and as you mentioned, looking for sponsors and things like that to come in. And then I was talking with Yasim also earlier about the university was looking for that space that they could put that gaming team in, right? That esports team. And I know, Kevin, you've been talking to people at the university about that also. To me, that has to happen, right? And we can make the space at the university to be able to pull that off. And I think it just is one way that we need to be thinking about the future, because as you guys know, education is changing very quickly. Some universities that are not, that are still going to be using chalkboard on that's not going to work, right? And so we have to come up with innovative ways of teaching, but then also innovative majors that cover esports, and as an example. So we need to do that as a university. So I'm so glad there are alumni like you that are pushing us in that direction. Because sometimes it takes that sort of outside. You guys are in the industry. You know what's going on. You're telling us this is important. We need to listen. And we need to make those changes. And so I think that's going to happen at the university. It's certainly going to happen in our program since we're adding
No, everything good in life or education or business comes with support and infrastructure. And some of those you just never can get the support of or the infrastructure for. So, that being said, universities have such an advantage with everything, and esports being a very minute portion of that, because support and infrastructure is both within their, guidance. So all we need to do is just understand and open up to the fact that that's where it's headed. And I'm glad that we can be a very small part of it with yourself. And we're going to do some awesome stuff in the coming semesters and try to give back to the students, and which you've already done, and some of our interns to do exactly that, give back so that they can learn, because there is no externship right now for gaming and esports. Very few. Unless you're game development, you're going to go to the game developers. But if you wanted to just intern for a team, if you didn't know someone in the team, very hard to get that done. So it's not a very low barrier to entry at all. So we need to open that up and make it such. I wanted to pop in. I apologize. We did go over time with that, but I did want to get my questions in. Jossam, thank you so much for a panel. Dr. Dan, we're going to
thank you, Dr. Dan.
If there's anything else you want to say, if not, we'll catch you on a phone call very soon. Appreciate you educating our audience today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It was great meeting you, Justin. And good catching up with you, Kevin. And let's stay in touch.
100%. We're going to have you on in a follow-up session in the semester to learn what's going on in the semester and hands-on of what's to come. So excited about that.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, Dr. J. Have a great day. See you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Really good educational panels today. Really, really enlightening. Really good stuff.
Yeah, super cool to get on with our alma mater and just, because it's awesome. It's awesome, to be a pioneer, I would say, in the educational space, and to be a part of, something that's, it's just never happened before. This is something, if you asked me 10 years ago, I would have never,
that's true.
I was going to tell him, and this is a story for you as well, is I think it was the year we were graduating from USF is where they put the two wolves statues in front of the library.
I know what you're talking about. I don't remember the year, but that, for context for everybody, that was 2010. That was exactly 10 years ago we graduated.
Yeah, 9-10.
And
so, and now we're just a step closer to getting a PlayStation controller.
That's funny. Let's take it back, 10 years ago, 11 years ago at the university. And 11 years ago, if you would have said two things, right? Because these were the themes for our business and our life from those 10 years was blockchain, technology, and now esports operation management, right? Gaming and esports operation management. If you would have been like, hey, you're graduating with a business degree, you just did an internship for whatever, Rocket Internet, which you became the first employee for their New York office. If they would have said, hey, so I got this thing for you, esports player management. You ever seen Jerry Maguire? What if I gave you some kids who game and you're going to get them $1 million contracts? You'd have been like, yeah, okay. Yeah. And 10 years later, you yourself, your business is working with the Golden State Warriors right down the street for that exact scenario. Isn't that something like what's going to happen in 10 years from now?
some things are just meant to be, Kevin,
Yeah.
you know, and education, and I think USF was always meant to come back to
The
us
catalyst.
just for the love. Yes,
It was,
just
it
for
was
the
the
love that
catalyst.
I have.
So if you look at it, because look at
Right.
the city we're in, and now we're working with players. The team is owned and operated by the Golden State Warriors. They own the Golden Guardians, which we operate a few players that we manage within the organization. And amazing to see 10 years ago that in those 10 years, the Warriors won like 5 championships. And then now these guys have an esports team, you know?
No, great, and you know, amazing conversations that we had today, because obviously, look at the the people that we manage. They're kids. These are kids that are excellent at gaming, and some of them are not even professional. They're just good at streaming and good at creating a personality online, and all of these things. I wrote a recent article on LinkedIn, is that protect your IP. These are things that kids do not know. They need to learn. They need to be educated in school, in their universities. That a lot of these management, business related topics are very much transcendent in the esports and gaming space, and it's now becoming a reality, I think.
100%. And for any of our friends and viewers watching or listening, I have just put on the Twitch to our one of our players who's an excellent human being, but one of the best League of Legends players in the world. This is an educational panel, so I'd like to leave it with a bit of educational note. I put that there. If you can see it, click on it, go check him out, because this is the exact scenario you want to be teaching your player and your future child if you're a parent out there. Because closer, Kaan Selik from Turkey, we were honored to have him join Gima Esports. We didn't recruit him. We didn't have him. He didn't find us. We didn't find him. It was just an honor to have him with us. So I say this heavy-heartedly, that he is a learning example for any player, any student of the game, because this is a professional. He streams in multiple languages for hundreds of thousands of viewers. Right now, as we speak, he's got just shy of 3,000 concurrent viewers, which is amazing. And an educational piece is for the players out there, really work on yourself, spend the money on yourself and your team. For the educators out there, spend the time and energy for your faculty, staff, and clients who are the students. And for the higher level executives out there, take a time to just read an ebook, get a sense of statistics, or reach out to the Dr. Dans or Danny Martins of the world, who can help you, show you what they did in their path to see, okay, that's what gaming and esports can help with my business. So, thank you for a good panel. You crushed it with Dr. Dan. We'll see more of him in the coming semesters. If anything else from you, we'll end it there.
Great. What do we have next week?
Next week, we have a toss-up, so we don't know. Finally, the next 6 weeks are so jam-packed, we might have 2 sessions coming up, and that'll be either on legal, advertising, or federations and associations coming up from Africa, Asia, and UK. Federation in esports. So,
yeah, that's going to be great.
Let's go.
Perfect.
Let's go. As usual.
Thanks, guys, for joining us.
Stay positive, stay safe, live with passion, everybody. Let's get this.
I'm gonna go wear my my graduation ring. Bye.
USF. Have a great day.